I thought the worst part was the affair. Finding out my husband was sleeping with one of his patients, someone vulnerable, someone who trusted him, was already enough to shatter me. I remember standing in his office trembling, holding the printout of their messages. She called him my doctor, my love, and he answered like a man who had forgotten he had a wife. I felt disgusted, humiliated, and stupid all at once. 15 years of marriage, and I was nothing more than a shadow to him. But I was wrong. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part came weeks later, when I discovered he had taken out a new life insurance policy in my name. A large one I didn't know about. And I realized with a kind of cold clarity that no one ever wants to feel. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to erase me. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe it was routine a financial decision. But then came the cabin trip he insisted on, the strange way he watched me at dinner, the wine that tasted just a little off, the guest log that had only one name, mine, the storm that unexpectedly cut off the power, and the smile he gave me when I said I wasn't feeling well. I'm not a dramatic person. I'm a teacher. I believe in logic, in calm, in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But when you find yourself staring at your husband and wondering whether the man who once kissed your tears away is now trying to poison your wine, something in you dies, and something else wakes up. I'm telling this story now because I survived, and because I want you to understand, sometimes betrayal doesn't come with yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it looks like a weekend getaway and ends with someone in handcuffs. People used to envy my life, not in a cruel or jealous way, but with that soft admiration reserved for those who seem to have it all figured out. A nice house in a quiet neighborhood, a devoted husband with a prestigious job, 2 incomes, no children by choice, and weekend brunches with friends, where I always had something kind to say about my Mark, Dr. Mark Ellison, the kind of man you wanted to trust on sight. Tall, clean-cut, calm in every room. He saved lives for a living cardiologist, by trade miracle worker, by reputation. His patients adored him. Nurses giggled behind his back. Even my parents, conservative and hard to please, softened when he was around. You chose well, my father told me once, and I had believed him. We met when I was 23, freshly out of grad school. I was idealistic, a little naive, and convinced that love meant safety. Mark was 10 years older, already established with a gravity that made me feel protected. Our first date felt like destiny. He listened more than he spoke. He made me feel like I was the only woman in the room. He made me laugh. God, how he made me laugh. When we got married 2 years later, I moved into his house, adopted his routines, and adjusted my life around his unpredictable hours. It felt noble, almost romantic, to wait for him at 9 p.m. dinners and fall asleep to the sound of the garage door rising long past midnight. He worked long shifts, sometimes 24-hour ones, but always kissed my forehead when he got home. I never questioned where he'd been. I never needed to. I became the kind of wife who made packed lunches, remembered every birthday in his family, and never complained when his work swallowed our weekends. My students at the high school called me Mrs. E and teased that I had a storybook marriage. I would smile and say, well, he's not perfect, but he's perfect for me. And in my heart, I believed that. But now, when I look back, I see the hairline cracks that had always been there, too fine to notice, too familiar to fear. He never really talked about his past. When I asked about old girlfriends, he brushed it off, Nothing serious. He didn't like pictures on the wall, said it made the house feel cluttered. When I got sick with the flu one winter and asked him to stay home with me, he hesitated just a moment too long before saying yes. At the time, I told myself he was just tired. Now I wonder if he simply didn't care. I remember how he used to retreat into silence when he was upset, how he never truly apologized, only shifted blame gently, like a surgeon moving organs aside, how he once told me that emotions cloud good decisions, and I'd laughed thinking it was just a doctor's quirk. He was calm, always calm, even when I wasn't, especially when I wasn't. And yet for most of our marriage, I still felt lucky. He was loyal, at least I thought so. We never fought about money. He never raised his voice. I used to think that meant we were healthy. Now I know it just meant he was good at hiding things. It started to change the year he got promoted to head of cardiology. Suddenly, he had private patients, wealthy ones. There were late-night calls, urgent visits, closed-door meetings in his home office. I noticed the shift, but I chalked it up to stress. He started bringing home small gifts, jewelry, perfume, expensive candles. I thought he was being sweet. Now, I wonder if he was buying silence, his or mine. The first time I saw her name, it was on a thank you card in his briefcase. Thank you for saving my life and my heart. Signed Elise. No last name. It didn't register as a red flag then. Patients wrote things like that all the time. Mark had dozens of cards like that. But something about the handwriting stuck in my mind, slanted dramatic, with little hearts over the eyes. Later that week, I saw a photo on his phone. Not scandalous, just a picture of a woman's hand on a wine glass. Red nails. A bracelet I didn't own. The caption was cropped out. When I asked about it, he said it was a photo from a dinner party at the hospital. Someone else's wife, he said. Don't be weird. I wanted to believe him, but I had already stopped trusting myself. There was a growing weight in my chest, a kind of quiet erosion. I didn't know it yet, but I was beginning to disappear from his life, from my own marriage, and someone else was taking my place. Someone who knew him before I ever did. Someone who had returned not by accident, but by design. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was being replaced. It started with a voice. I heard it through the walls one evening while Mark was on a call in his study. I wasn't trying to listen, it was just that kind of voice. Low, sultry, and strangely familiar. A woman laughing. The kind of laugh that wasn't meant to be overheard by a wife. I froze mid-step in the hallway, heart thudding. Mark's voice followed, soft, amused, almost boyish. It had been years since I'd heard him laugh like that, and never with me, not recently. I backed away quietly and told myself it was work. Maybe a nurse, maybe a client, but I couldn't let it go. That night while he showered, I picked up his phone. It was locked, of course. He'd changed his passcode a few months earlier, said something vague about clinic privacy. But he was careless. He left his iPad unlocked on the coffee table. It only took a minute to find the messages. They weren't even hidden. The contact was saved as E. I clicked it, and there they were, lines of intimacy exchanged in the hollow hours. I thought he'd been sleeping beside me. I missed you today. I can still taste you. You looked so beautiful during the exam. I had to remind myself I was at work. Let's do Barcelona again. Same rooftop. Same bed. Barcelona. The word struck like a gong in my memory. Years ago, during one of our early dates, I'd asked Mark if he had ever been in love before me. He'd paused, then said, There was someone years ago. Barcelona. Didn't end well. He never told me her name. Never showed a photo. Just said it was over. But it wasn't. It was Elise. Her full name was in a billing record I later found while pretending to organize our tax receipts. Elise Moreno. Cardiology patient. Private insurance. Multiple visits. I looked her up. She was stunning dark hair. Fierce red lips, the kind of woman who made you feel underdressed just by breathing. A decade younger than Mark, but only a few years younger than me. I stared at her photo for a long time. It wasn't just jealousy. It was dread. Because something about her eyes felt deliberate. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't just lust. She had come back for him, and he had let her in. I confronted him that night. Not directly, I was too afraid of what I might hear. Instead, I asked how work was mentioned, that I'd seen a name I recognized, Elise. And wasn't that the name of the woman from Barcelona? He froze. Just a second. But it was enough. Then he smiled that perfect clinical smile. Coincidence, he said. Not the same person. He kissed my forehead like nothing had changed, but everything had. From that moment on, I stopped pretending. I watched him more closely. I tracked his calls. I searched every drawer, every jacket pocket. I told myself it was for the truth, but deep down, I already knew. The final confirmation came in the form of a receipt. A jewelry store 2 days before our anniversary. But the item wasn't in our home. A gold necklace with an engraving, Always M. My name doesn't start with E. I stared at that receipt until the numbers blurred. He hadn't even bothered to hide it well. Maybe he thought I wouldn't check. Maybe he didn't care if I knew. Or maybe he wanted me to know. Because the deeper I looked, the more I began to see a pattern. Financial changes. New passwords. Life insurance documents I didn't remember signing. I requested copies of our policies under the guise of a tax audit, and there it was. A new policy, signed electronically, with my forged signature. The beneficiary, Dr. Mark Ellison. I remember standing in the kitchen holding that paper, listening to the sound of the dishwasher, and wondering what it would be like to die without knowing you were about to. That weekend he brought up the idea of a getaway. Just us, he said. No phones, no distractions. We need this. And I agreed. I nodded, smiled, pretended to be touched. But in my mind, I was already packing the truth. Already building my escape. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being hunted. By the man who once held my hand in hospital waiting rooms. By the man I thought would grow old with me. The house felt different after that. The walls thinner. The knives sharper. Every touch of his made my skin crawl. I stopped sleeping. I started planning. And worst of all, through all the rage and betrayal, was the grief, because even after everything, I still remembered the man I married, and I still missed him. But he was gone, replaced by something else entirely. The cabin was beautiful, isolated, surrounded by tall pine trees and the soundless hush of snow, a place where no one would hear you scream. Mark had rented it for the weekend. He said it was a surprise, something special for us. I didn't ask questions. I packed warm clothes, my favorite books, a bottle of wine. I also packed pepper spray, a voice recorder, and copies of the insurance papers he thought I hadn't seen. The drive up was long, winding, and eerily quiet. Mark was in good spirits, humming to himself, talking about how we'd reconnect. He reached for my hand as he drove. I let him take it. I let him believe I was still asleep in his lie. When we arrived, he lit a fire, opened a bottle of red, and made dinner steak my favorite. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The wine tasted different, slightly metallic. I faked a yawn, said I was tired, that the trip had worn me out. He smiled almost knowingly. "Get some rest," he said. "We've got all weekend." But I didn't rest. While he cleaned the kitchen, I slipped into the bathroom and pressed record on the small device tucked inside my toiletry bag. I opened his briefcase while he showered, found his laptop. Password protected, but I already knew it. Elise's birthday. Of course. I found more than I wanted to see. Photos of her nude, smiling, lounging in what I now recognized as our guest bed. Messages about how much longer. A draft email to a lawyer requesting a property transfer upon death of spouse. A folder titled Barcelona Revisited. Inside notes on poison dosages, life insurance payout periods, and a spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy. I sat on the bathroom floor shaking, not with fear anymore, but fury. Cold, clear, blinding fury. And then came the final blow, a recorded voice message. Elise's voice. She'll never see it coming. She trusts you too much. You've always been so good at making women feel safe. I couldn't breathe. My body felt like it was turning to stone, piece by piece. That laugh, the one I'd heard through the wall, was now mocking me through a speaker. She wasn't just complicit. She was enjoying it. Later that night, Mark lit candles. He poured me another glass. The wine shimmered darkly under the firelight. "Let's toast," he said. I raised my glass. To what? He smiled. To new beginnings. I smiled back. "Yours or mine?" He blinked. Just a flicker. But I saw the flicker, and then I saw something else. Fear. I set my glass down and looked him in the eyes. "I know everything, Mark." He didn't respond at first. Just stared. Then slowly his expression shifted. The mask fell. "You went through my things," he asked, voice flat. "You forged my signature," I said. "You made me your insurance policy. You were going to kill me." His jaw tensed. "You're being dramatic. You drugged the wine." He said nothing. The silence stretched, bloated and suffocating. And then, like nothing had happened, he stood up, walked to the fire, and poured himself another drink. "You can't prove anything," he said. I pulled the recorder from my sweater pocket and hit play. Elise's voice filled the room crystal clear. He froze. "I already sent it," I whispered. "To my lawyer and to the police." He turned toward me, mouth open to speak, but the knock on the cabin door beat him to it. 2 officers stood outside and the snow guns drawn. Mark didn't resist. He didn't say a word, just raised his hands and stepped into the cold night. The ride home was silent. I sat in the back of the patrol car while they processed the scene. I gave my statement, handed over the files. One of the officers, a younger man with kind eyes, kept looking at me like I was made of glass. "You were lucky," he said quietly. "If you hadn't figured it out." I nodded, but it wasn't luck. It was instinct. It was survival. It was the quiet knowing that builds in a woman when the man she loves begins to turn cold, when love becomes performance, when protection becomes danger. They took him away. I went home alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed and listened to the house breathe without him. It was the first time in years I felt safe. The next morning, I walked into our kitchen and made coffee, the same brand he liked. I drank it slowly, staring at the fruit bowl he used to fill. There were no strawberries, no oranges, just silence. But it was mine now, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I didn't move out right away. There's this myth that once the monster is gone, you suddenly feel free. Like fear packs its bags and walks out with him. But that's not how it works. Fear lingers. It lives in your skin, in the corners of a quiet room, in the sound of the floor creaking at night. I stayed in that house for 3 more weeks. Every morning I woke up and reminded myself, "You're alive." Every night I checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. I scrubbed the counters with bleach, not because they were dirty, but because I needed to erase him. His coffee stains, his fingerprints on the fridge, the faint scent of his cologne on the robe he used to wear. I filed for divorce the day after his arraignment. I didn't tell anyone, not my colleagues, not my neighbors. It wasn't shame that kept me quiet. It was self-preservation. I was tired of being the woman who explained things, the woman who justified pain, the woman who smiled through disaster so no one else had to feel awkward. Let them wonder why the photos came down. Let them whisper when his name vanished from the mailbox. I owed no one a performance. The court granted a protective order. His medical license was suspended pending investigation. Elise vanished like a stain under cold water. No social media, no forwarding address. Cowardice looks so much like freedom when no one's holding you accountable. But I wasn't looking for justice. I wasn't even looking for closure. I was looking for air. For a day, I could walk through my front door without wondering if it would be my last. So I started to pack. I gave away our wedding china, sold the couch we bought in year 3 of marriage, the one we used to fall asleep on legs, tangled mouths, sticky with red wine. I kept one thing, a photograph of myself taken on our honeymoon. I looked different then. Lighter, unbruised, but not weaker. That woman didn't know what survival would look like. This one does. I moved into a small apartment near the school. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, a creaky stairwell that makes you feel like someone's always arriving. But it's quiet. It's mine. And I sleep with the window open now. People ask me sometimes very carefully how I'm doing. I say I'm fine. And I am. I am fine in the way trees are fine after the fire has passed through. Blackened. Standing. Growing. Some nights I sit with a cup of tea and ask myself the question I never got to ask him. Would you have done it, Mark? Would you really have watched me die? And I ask you now, if you found out your husband planned your murder, would you still be expected to explain yourself? Have you ever been quietly erased by the person who once said, "I will never leave you," because I was? But I came back louder than the silence he left behind. Some absences are louder than any scream. His is one of them. The house is sold now. Strangers live in the rooms where I once dreamed of children. Sunday morning's laughter. I don't drive by. I don't look at photos. I let the past dissolve without ceremony. I changed my name, not to hide, but to remember who I was before him, before the slow erosion, before the nights I stared at the ceiling wondering if love had an expiration date, or if I just hadn't read the fine print. People love a comeback story. They want to see you triumphant heels on courtroom marble lipstick, flawless. But healing isn't glossy. It's messy. It's crying in the shower. It's flinching when someone touches your shoulder too gently. It's waking up from dreams where you never made it out of that cabin. I don't want revenge. I want peace. And I have it now. Some mornings I sit by the window with coffee and write in a journal I never planned to share. I write to her, my younger self, the girl who believed love could fix anything. I tell her she wasn't stupid. She wasn't weak. She just trusted the wrong man with the right parts of her. I don't think Mark ever loved me. I think he loved the idea of being adored, and I think Elise loved the game more than the prize. They'll live with what they did. I live with what I survived. The difference is, I still have my name, my breath, my spine, and every day I choose to live. If you're listening to this and wondering whether to walk away, wondering if the silence in your home is a warning and not just distance, please listen to it, because the scariest monsters are the ones who sleep beside you. And sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is leave, before they bury you with their lies. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who sharpen the knife behind our backs. She loved him. She built her life around him. And in return, he saw her not as a partner, not even as a person, but as a policy, a number, a name he could sign away. But she didn't die. She rose. She told her story. And by doing that, she saved not just herself, but every woman watching who might be doubting that quiet, uneasy voice in her own chest. If you've ever questioned your worth, your safety, or your sanity in a relationship, this story is your reminder. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are hearing the truth before it's too late. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Have you ever felt erased in your own relationship? Subscribe for more true inspired stories that expose the pain, the silence, and the power of walking away. And remember, surviving isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you'll ever do.